Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Ever get that feeling where you're like right on the edge of remembering something super important?
Yeah.
Like maybe a fact you just learned or the name of someone you just met,
Hmm.
and it feels like it's right there on the tip of your tongue,
Ugh, it's the worst.
but you just can't quite grab it.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Makes you wonder what's actually going on in our brains when we're not actively thinking about these things, right?
It really does.
Like what if sleep wasn't just our brains hitting the pause button,
Right.
but actually a super important time for really locking in those memories?
Yeah, that's a really fascinating way to think about it.
Yeah.
And it's a great lead-in to what we're going to be exploring today.
Okay.
We're going to be diving into some really interesting new research that suggests sleep plays a much more active and complex role in memory consolidation than we might have thought.
Wow.
And we're going to be looking at a study from the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria. You shared some fantastic materials with us, a
Yeah.
really accessible health news article, and the original in-depth scientific paper published in the journal Neuron.
Exactly. And it's not just about, feeling rested or recharged.
Right.
This research really digs into the specifics of how our brains,
Yeah.
or at least the brains of some very hardworking lab rats,
Right.
are essentially replaying and kind of refining those memories that they made during the day while we're sound asleep.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So the main focus for our deep dive today is going to be this really detailed study from the Institute of Science and Technology, Austria.
Okay.
And the researchers there designed a very ambitious experiment where they monitored the brain activity of rats in a part of the brain that's super important for spatial navigation and learning,
Okay.
called the hippocampus.
The hippocampus.
Exactly. And they did this for up to 20 hours of sleep,
Wow.
after the rats had learned to navigate a maze to find food rewards. And we'll also be talking about some of the key points that were highlighted in that health news article you shared,
Okay.
to give everyone listening a really clear understanding of everything that they discovered.
So our goal for this deep dive is to really get a good grasp on how important the different stages of sleep are for our memory
Absolutely.
and the amazing changes that happen in our brains while we're sleeping,
Right.
and what this can tell us about learning and retaining information.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's unpack this study a little bit.
Sure.
What were the scientists really trying to figure out here?
Well, the main question they were trying to answer was how these different phases of sleep actually contribute to making those newly learned spatial memories
Okay.
more efficiently recalled.
Okay.
And previous research had already shown that the hippocampus
Okay.
reactivates these recent memories during sleep.
Right.
And they had also observed that the more these memories were reactivated, the better the rats were able to remember them later on. But what was really unclear was how these reactivations actually behaved
Yeah.
over a longer period of time, over a full sleep cycle.
Right. So they weren't just looking at like the immediate aftermath of learning something, but more like the whole, overnight process.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how did they actually keep track of all that brain activity for so long?
So it was a huge technical undertaking.
I bet.
They used these tiny wireless recording devices
Oh,
that were designed to monitor the activity of individual neurons,
neurons.
the brain's nerve cells,
Okay.
in the hippocampus of the rats.
Gotcha.
And this allowed them to continuously monitor the activity of these brain cells for up to 20 hours after the rats had finished that spatial learning task.
Right. The maze with the snacks.
Exactly, remembering the locations of the food in the maze.
Okay, cool.
And this 20-hour period was a really big improvement over some of those earlier studies
Wow.
that only looked at much shorter periods of sleep.
I can imagine. Yeah. So what were some of the main things they observed?
Okay, so the findings were super interesting.
Okay.
What they saw was that in those early phases of sleep,
Okay.
especially during non-rapid eye movement, sleep, which is that deeper non-dreaming stage of sleep,
Oh, okay.
the patterns of activity that they recorded in the neurons closely resembled the patterns that were present when the rats were awake and learning the maze.
Oh, wow.
It was almost like their brains were replaying the navigational experiences from the day.
Like a mental rehearsal.
Exactly like a mental rehearsal.
That's really cool.
But these patterns didn't stay exactly the same over time.
Really? So they changed.
They did.
Mm.
Yeah, over the course of that extended sleep period.
Okay.
Those initial neuron patterns didn't just repeat this. They underwent a pretty big reorganization,
Interesting.
which the researchers called representational drift.
Representational drift. Okay.
Yeah, and what they saw was that some of the neurons that were very active during the initial learning phase
Okay.
became less active or even completely stopped firing. When the same memory, the location of the food, was being reactivated later on in the sleep cycle.
So it's not just like a static replay, the brain is messing with it.
It's not static at all.
It's editing.
The brain is actively modifying how it's representing that memory.
That's so cool. So if those original neurons are quieting down, what's taking over?
Right, so this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
So as some of those initially active neurons became less involved,
Okay.
a whole new group of neurons gradually started firing in response to that same memory,
Oh, wow.
the location of those food rewards.
So it's not like the memory was gone. The brain is just changing up which neurons are in charge of that memory.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Like imagine a play where different actors take on the same roles.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, so the memory is still there,
Right.
but the neural cast is changing over time during sleep.
Right.
And one of the most important things they found was that the neuronal activity patterns that were observed in these later stages of sleep started to look a lot like the brain activity that was recorded when the rats woke up,
Oh, wow.
and successfully remembered where those rewards were.
That's wild.
And that strongly suggests that sleep isn't just passively storing memories.
It's working on them.
It's actively reshaping the neural code
right.
to make the brain better at getting that information back out when it's needed again.
Like prepping them for retrieval.
Exactly.
That's amazing. And there was something in the research about different sleep stages, right?
Yeah, so they were looking at non-rapid eye movement sleep and rapid eye movement sleep,
Right.
having different effects on this representational drift.
Yeah.
Right? They found that non-rapid eye movement sleep, that deeper sleep,
Yeah.
seemed to speed up that reactivation drift, that reorganization of neuron patterns.
Interesting.
But then they also found that rapid eye movement sleep,
Which is the dreaming sleep, right?
the dreaming sleep, exactly, seemed to actually counteract that drift.
Oh, wow.
So maybe these two main stages of sleep actually have opposite roles in how our brains process memories.
Huh. That's really fascinating. So non-rapid eye movement sleep wants to change things up, and rapid eye movement sleep wants to keep things stable.
That seems to be what's going on.
Like some sort of balancing act that we don't even know is happening.
This really intricate dance that's happening in our brains while we're asleep.
I know. And what about the overall number of neurons that are involved in representing a specific memory after sleep?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question.
Did that change at all?
So what they found was that after sleep and all this representational drift,
Okay.
it seemed like fewer neurons were actually needed to represent a specific memory,
Oh, interesting.
like the location of a food reward.
So the brain got more efficient?
Yeah, that seems like the brain is getting more efficient at representing those memories during sleep.
That's cool.
And that might actually free up some resources for encoding new information when we wake up.
So it's not just about making the memories that we already have stronger, it's about getting ready for new stuff.
That's exactly right.
That's really cool. So what does all this mean for people like me and our listeners who are interested in learning new things?
Well, this research really shows us that sleep is way more than just a break for our brains when it comes to memory.
Right.
It's an active period of reorganizing and optimizing those memories.
Right.
And the fact that these neuronal patterns change during sleep
Okay.
to become more like what we see when we successfully recall something
Yeah.
suggests that sleep is actually preparing our brains to better retrieve information when we need it later on.
Sleep is prepping us to remember things better.
Exactly.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So sleep is not just an archivist, it's like an editor,
I love that.
getting those memories ready for prime time.
Yeah, making them more accessible.
And this representational drift
Right.
and the freeing up of neurons.
Yeah.
Could help explain why sleep is so important for learning new things and fitting them into what we already know.
It's like the brain is decluttering and reorganizing its files overnight.
Right, making everything neater.
Exactly. So it can access and connect new information more easily.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like you're bombarded with all this new information during the day,
Right.
and then sleep helps you sort through it
Exactly. Figure out what's important.
and make those connections.
Exactly. And it's really interesting how non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sleep seem to have different roles in this process.
Yeah, one's pushing for change and the other's stabilizing things.
Yeah, maybe getting the right balance of those sleep stages is crucial for making the most of our memories.
It really seems that way. Now, it's important to remember that this study was done on rats.
Right.
So how does that affect what we can actually say about human memory?
Well, you know, rat brains and human brains have a lot in common,
Yeah,
but they are different.
for sure.
So while this study gives us really valuable insights,
Okay.
We can't be 100% sure that everything works exactly the same way in human brains.
Right, they're more complicated.
Human brains are much more complex, and our sleep patterns are a little bit different from rats.
Right.
So more research is needed to confirm if these findings apply directly to us.
Okay, that's fair. And did this study look at any specific types of memory?
Yeah, so they specifically looked at spatial learning,
Spatial learning.
which is the ability to remember locations in our environment,
Oh,
like remembering where you parked your car.
right, or how to get around a new city.
Exactly.
Okay.
It would be interesting to see if this same representational drift happens with other types of memories too,
Right.
like remembering facts or learning new physical skills.
Like riding a bike or something.
Exactly.
I'd love to know. And did the researchers have any unanswered questions or things they were still thinking about?
Yeah, they were very open about that.
Okay.
They said that they don't totally understand why this representational drift happens.
Okay.
They know it's happening,
Mm-hmm.
but they need to do more research to figure out what's really driving this reshaping of memories during sleep.
So they found something really interesting, but they're not quite sure why it's happening?
It's a mystery they're still working on.
That's cool. And the health news article we read had some great quotes from the scientists.
Yeah, I loved those.
Yeah, that really helped clarify things. Can you share a few of those again?
Of course.
Oh.
So Professor Joseph Csikszentmihalyi, who led the research team,
Okay.
said, we showed that the neuronal assemblies in the early stages of sleep reflect recently learned spatial memories. However, as sleep progresses, neuronal activity patterns gradually transform into those seen later when the rats awaken and remember the locations of their food rewards.
So that really highlights that memories are changing during sleep.
Absolutely.
It's not just passive storage.
It's a dynamic process.
That's amazing. And were there any other quotes that really stood out to you?
Yeah, Lars Bollman, one of the lead authors on this study, said,
Okay.
our findings were unexpected. We showed that the activity patterns of neurons linked to the reward locations reorganized during the long sleep. Most surprisingly, we showed that while the pattern of firing neurons in the early stages of sleep echoed the neuronal activity in the learning phase, this pattern later evolved to mirror the neuronal activity when the rats woke up and remembered where the rewards were located.
So they were surprised by how much things changed during sleep.
Right, it wasn't what they were expecting.
Right, and that progression towards the recall state is really interesting.
It really is.
Yeah, like the brain is getting ready to remember.
Absolutely.
I love that. And Professor Csikszentmihalyi also had some thoughts on why this representational drift might be happening, right?
Yeah, so he suggested that it's possible that memory representations must be formed quickly during learning,
Okay.
but that such representations are not optimal for long-term storage.
Interesting.
Therefore, a process may take place in sleep that optimizes these representations in sleep to reduce brain resources to store a specific memory.
Okay.
Any new memories must find a way to be integrated into existing knowledge. Frequent repetitions of the new memories, as well as partial change in the neuronal code, may thus help optimize their integration into existing memory representations.
So basically, the initial memory formation might be kind of rough.
Yeah, like a first draft.
And then sleep is when the brain goes in and polishes it up,
Exactly.
makes it more efficient, more durable, and connects it to everything else we know.
I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, I love that. So to wrap things up for our listeners,
Sure.
what are the big takeaways here for people who want to learn and remember things better?
I think the biggest takeaway is that sleep is not just downtime for our brains.
Right. It's not just about resting.
It's an active process that's really important for making our memories stronger.
And more accessible.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This research gives us strong evidence that our brains are working hard while we sleep to reorganize those new memories and make them stick.
Yeah, I'm definitely rethinking my all-nighters.
And the discovery of this representational drift and how it's influenced by different sleep stages shows us just how complex and amazing this whole process really is.
It's wild.
It really is.
And, for those of us who really value learning efficiently and effectively
Yeah,
without getting overwhelmed,
absolutely.
this research really drives home the point that sleep is super important for any learning strategy.
Yeah, it's not just about the hours you put in studying or practicing. It's also about giving your brain the time it needs to process everything.
Sleep is like the secret ingredient.
Exactly.
Yeah. So knowing that our brains are actually restructuring memories while we sleep really makes you think about how to optimize our sleep habits.
Right.
Especially after learning something new.
Yeah,
Maybe a full night's sleep is the key to really solidifying those new insights.
that's what it seems like.
I know, and the next time you're trying to learn something really challenging, remember that it doesn't stop when you close the book or turn off the computer.
Yeah.
It keeps going while you sleep.
Right, your brain is still working on it.
It makes you wonder what other things are happening in our brains while we're asleep.
It's amazing to think about all the hidden processes that might be shaping our memories and even who we are.
Yeah, so much is going on behind the scenes.
It really makes you appreciate the power of a good night's sleep.
Absolutely.
Sweet dreams, everyone.
Yeah, good night.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Do Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.